Hey YouTube, it's Eric. Happy New Year. Hope you're all doing well. This is going to be a pretty quick video here. I couldn't download this video because the only place that is archived it is C-SPAN. So I decided it's only like a 2-minute clip, so I'm just going to screen record it here and make it a quick video. But this was Rupert Murdoch, the CEO of Newscorp. Newscorp is like an empire in itself. I recommend you go just read the Wikipedia list of assets owned by Newscorp. In the U.S., they own Fox News, Wall Street Journal, New York Post. There's many others. Sky News Australia is another big one for the Murdoch empire. The News of the World, the London paper, the Daily, the Sun. He owns the Boston Herald, the former asset. HarperCollins Publishers, Echo Press, Zondervan Publishing, Dow Jones Newswires, Investors Business Daily. This is just some of the media conglomerates that's under Murdoch's empire. And it's a very interesting quote that a lot of people probably aren't aware that in 2008, Rupert Murdoch actually compared News Corp to the Jesuits at Georgetown University, Jesuit Georgetown. He gave a speech there in 2008, and he said that News Corp is very similar to the Jesuits. So the point being is that he's probably one of the most influential media magnates in the world, and he said that his company is just like the Jesuits. But so that just reminds me, before we get to those comments, I just want to read a little. This was a former Catholic priest here, J.J. Murphy. He was a Benedictine monk who then converted to Protestantism. He wrote a bunch of fantastic pamphlets in the 1940s. He was a lead editor at the Converted Catholic magazine alongside Leo H. Lehman. People probably know Leo H. Lehman from his great short book, Behind the Dictators. J.J. Murphy here in his article, Catholic Fascism in Argentina. The current Jesuit Pope is from Argentina. Argentina is where was the Vatican's favorite spot to ship Nazi war criminals. Hungarian Nazi war criminal Ferenc Vajta actually bragged this is in CIA files, but Vajta bragged about how he would be soon going to Buenos Aires with the Jesuits. That being Nazi war criminal Ferenc Vajta, who said that. I had that all documented on my website. But Murphy writes here, the most highly centralized international organization in the world is the Roman Catholic Church. Its political strategy in any particular country is but one phase of the international master plan worked out by Jesuit strategists at the Vatican. There you go. Well said there. And then I've read this quote before here, but this was from the biographical book on Knight of Malta, Jesuit-trained Opus Dei Crusader, CIA Director William Casey. William Casey, if you aren't aware, he would take a windowless C-141 jet underground to the Vatican routinely while he was CIA Director. So we read here, this quick quote, Chapter 3, in the hands of the Jesuits. The director of the CIA. A cynic might argue that Bill Casey was indoctrinated rather than educated at Fordham University. Of course, I've read the quote many times. G. Gordon Liddy, in his autobiography, Will, says that the Jesuits at Fordham University rule the world and that they enjoy it. But Casey writes here, this is a quote directly from Casey, quote, the Jesuits awed Casey, quote, they are brilliant. He wrote a friend, quote, I'm absolutely convinced that they have the right dope on this world, end quote. Again, so this is the CIA director, William Casey, saying, they are brilliant, he wrote a friend, speaking of the Jesuits, quote, I'm absolutely convinced that they have the right dope on this world. They have the right dope on this world, that being the Jesuits. That's being admitted by the director of the CIA. That just kind of reminds me of the video that I got on my channel of another Jesuit trained director of the CIA, Leon Panetta, saying that he he had many Jesuit instructors at the University of Santa Clara to make sure that they were all behaving. Panetta and his fellow students. And Panetta then said that I needed all the Jesuit grace and blessing I could get to survive in Washington. So there's some historical background. So now I'm just gonna play the video here of Rupert Murdoch's quotes. Again, it's very fascinating if you haven't seen this. He basically compares Newscorp to the Jesuits, that being Rupert Murdoch. And I think we now know why Rupert Murdoch employed Veet Din as a top attorney at Newscorp. Veet Din, the professor at Jesuit Georgetown University who drafted was the architect of the Police State Patriot Act. But here's the clip here, though. This is from C-SPAN. This lecture is titled Creative Destruction, News for the 21st Century. And yeah, here's the clip here. So we'll play the little intro and then we'll go right to Murdoch's
Lincoln Bicentennial.
Now Rupert Murdoch, chairman and CEO of News Corporation. News Corp owns Fox News, 20th Century Fox, MySpace, The New York Post, and has recently purchased The Wall Street Journal. He talks about the future of news and takes questions from students at Georgetown University.
Jesuit Georgetown University.
This is almost an hour.
Dean of the McDonough School of Business.
Okay, so then there's a few-minute introduction. So here's
2007, as most of you know, News Corporation acquired Dow.
This is the current dean of the business school here, George Daly at Jesuit Georgetown.
Dow Jones, parent corporation of the Wall Street Journal. A quite remarkable path by a quite remarkable man. Please welcome our guest, Mr. Rupert Murdoch.
I was just before we watch this, I thought this was interesting too. Just watching forget the name of the show. I was watching an Amazon Prime show with a buddy recently on the English Premier League and Manchester United over in the UK. I wasn't aware how much Rupert Murdoch is essentially the architect of the English Premier League in his company Sky Sports, which Murdoch owned. I thought that was just very interesting, but just more ties to the Roman bread and circus. But here are Murdoch's comments about the Jesuits and News Corp being similar.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, George, for that wonderful, generous introduction. I'm honored to be here at Georgetown University. You have a faculty that is first rate. You have a student body that is one of the best in America. And until a little upstart named Davidson came along, your basketball team had a good shot at the NCAA title. But President,
I just decided that was the year Steph Curry was playing for Davidson and they beat Georgetown in the NCAA tournament.
Both the Jesuits and News Corporation NCAA title. But President DeJoy's invitation started me thinking about the many similarities between Jesuits and News Corporation.
So it looks like there's a bit of a lag in the C-SPAN video.
Started me thinking about the many similarities between Jesuits and News Corporation.
Many similarities between Jesuits and News Corporation.
You have a student body that is one of the best in America. And until a little upstart named Davidson came along, your basketball team had a good shot at the NCAA title. But President DeJoy's invitation started me thinking about the many similarities between Jesuits and News Corporation. Both the Jesuits and News Corporation attract highly talented people from all over the globe. Both the Jesuits and
News Corporation attract highly talented people from all over the globe.
News Corporation like to challenge the status quo.
They like to challenge the status quo. Wow.
And both the Jesuits and News Corporation have a reputation for independence and innovation. Of course, there are some differences. I don't want to discourage anyone.
Just some differences. It's mostly similar, but there's only
to
some
challenge
minor
the
differences.
Status quo. And both the Jesuits and News Corporation have a reputation for independence and innovation. Of course, there are some differences. I don't want to discourage anyone who might be considering the priesthood. But I'll tell you that at News Corporation, we don't insist on vows of poverty or chastity. And as
Neither do the Jesuits. That's all just a dead letter.
chief executive, I can tell you that I'm sometimes not sure about the degree of obedience either. Most of you are probably familiar with some of our products, like Fox News. I'm proud of what we've done with Fox.
I'm sure it is hired the Vatican EWTN journalist Raymond Arroyo. Raymond Arroyo now works for Fox News. Raymond
And
Arroyo
innovation.
was the individual who did the interview with U.S. President George W. Bush when Bush said he saw God in the eyes of the Pope. And then Arroyo was a good way to end the interview. He's now at Fox. Raymond Arroyo tells you everything you need to know. You know.
Of course, there are some differences.
So I'm just going to play it one more time here.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, George, for that wonderful, generous introduction. I'm honored to be here at Georgetown University. You have a faculty that is first rate. You have a student body that is one of the best.
Faculty that is first rate, too. That's referring to the Jesuit priests that run the school.
America. And until a little upstart named Davidson came along, your basketball team had a good shot at the NCAA title. But President DeGioia's invitation started me thinking about the many similarities between Jesuits and News Corporation. Both the Jesuits and News Corporation attract highly talented people from all over the globe. Both the Jesuits and News Corporation like to challenge the status quo. And both the Jesuits and News Corporation have a reputation for independence and innovation. Of course, there are some differences. I don't want to discourage anyone who might be considering the priesthood. But I'll tell you that at News Corporation, we don't insist on vows of poverty or chastity. And as chief executive, I can tell you that I'm sometimes not sure about the degree of obedience either.
There you go. Jesuits and News Corp, very similar. And I have documented. I think Slate magazine even covered these comments from Murdoch. Murdoch, of course, too, is a knight of Saint Gregory the Great. That's covered here in this article by the LA Times back in 1998. Pope honors Rupert Murdoch, Roy Disney, Bob Hope. That's from the LA Times. You see his comments about News Corp being like the Jesuits. You see the Georgetown Voice covers that here. And I linked this in my post here on my blog. See, Murdoch defends News Corp. Rupert Murdoch's News Corp is just like the Jesuits, he told a mostly full Gaston Hall yesterday. Here's the same quotes from Slate.com. Put an article, Rupert Murdoch is not the Antichrist, proof revealed at Georgetown University. And you see, here's this quote again. The Jesuits and News Corp attract highly talented people from all over the world. The Jesuits and News Corp like to challenge the status quo, and both the Jesuits and News Corp have a reputation of independence and innovation. Of course, there are some differences. Again, they're mostly similar. There's just some minor differences. I don't want to discourage anyone from considering the priesthood, but I will tell you that at News Corp, we don't insist on vows of poverty or chastity, Murdoch said. quote, and as chief executive, I can tell you I'm not sure about the degree of obedience either. And we just know why here too. Why we mentioned how Veet Din was on the board of directors of Newscorp, the Roman Catholic Jesuit professor who drafted the USA Police State USA Patriot Act. Yeah, right here. So Din. So while the news of the world scandal was taking place, Din became in charge of the investigation. See, Din, along with fellow News Corp board member, fellow lawyer, and corporation executive Joel Klein, took over the investigation of the News of the World phone hacking affair, which went nowhere. I wonder why. And related corporation issues in July 2011 from the News International UK chief Rebecca Brooks. Emerged after that Jesuit-trained Veet Din was appointed to the board of the investigation that Din is godfather to one of Lachlan Murdoch's children. That's Rupert Murdoch's son, and a friend of Lachlan since 2003. So, yeah, would you look at that? And here's an article covering that. Here, Murdoch behind a paywall. You see, there's a Bloomberg article covering this. There's lots of conflict of interest you see there. Din worked as Assistant Attorney General of the United States from 2001 to 2003. Din has been a professor of law at Georgetown University Law Center. His expertise lies in constitutional law, corporations law, and law of economics of development. He was also currently co-director of the Asian Law and Policy Studies program. He previously served as co-director of the Joint Program in Law and Business Administration from 1998 to 1999. And recently, Din was appointed Chief Legal and Policy Officer of Fox Corporation and would report directly to Lachlan Murdoch. Din is responsible for all legal compliance and regulatory matters, as well as oversight of government and public affairs. Oh, you look at that. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree, as the saying goes. Again, so you see here, News Corp is just like the Jesuits. That's what I wanted to point out in this video. And I just wanted to mention there that interesting connection to Veet Din with News Corp in the News of the World phone hacking scandal. Again, Veet Din was on the board at News Corp, Jesuit professor at Georgetown, and Veet Din drafted the USA Patriot Act. I'll link these C-SPAN links